Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. Christmas is on the horizon, and it had me thinking, how did Mary and George celebrate the Christmas holiday? It should be interesting to find out. So let us step back in time and see Christmas past in the royal perspective. So according to the book George V, Never a Dull Moment by Jane Ridley, Christmas in 1908 at Sandringham, it was done with a lot of tradition. It had included like Dickens, Fabergé, and Saxe-Coburg, and that had been created by George's dad and mom, Bertie and Alex. Weeks before Christmas, May, as she was known at that time, was focused on Christmas presents, choosing, buying, and arranging them, and the presents weren't just for the immediate family and members of the household, but for people in that dynasty network. And during the height of 1905, Russian Revolution, Nicholas and Alexandra would send their Christmas gifts, mainly being Fabergé items. On Christmas Eve at 3 o'clock, George took the children to the coach house, and there they would find long tables covered with white tablecloths with joints of beef, and the room smelt like raw meat, and all the estate workers, about 300 people, waited outside, and each family would receive a joint of beef. George figured out that 1.5 tons of beef were distributed among the 1,420 people that lived on the estate. And the German tradition is to exchange gifts on Christmas Eve. So at 5:30, the Wales family got into an omnibus and rode to the big house. It was a short trip. And then they were greeted by George's father and mother. The children got excited when one of the servants dressed up like Santa Claus. Then they went into the ballroom. The Christmas tree was about as high as the ceiling, and it was the center of the room. And the room was lined with trestle tables, and they were divided into sections, and they were piled with presents for each person. So the household waited in a corridor outside, and they would be called in one by one to receive their presents. And the queen would be on one side and the king on the other, and they would explain their gifts. Fritz Ponsonby, private secretary for King Edward VII, was overcome with his gifts. He got watercolors, silver cigarette cases, a silver inkstand, pens, and studs. And the children, they had to wait until the end so that they would really get excited about it when it was their turn. The bad news for them was that when they opened their presents, they had to be left on display until New Year's Day. So that's the pits. So George and May and the kids, they got back to the York cottage about 7:30 p.m. George would then begin to write letters. And on Christmas Day, he wrote letters then too. And one year he wrote about 40 letters, and he wrote to his wife also, and he said, "I fear sometimes I have lost my temper with you, and I've often been rude, but I'm sure you know me well enough by now to know that I did not mean it." And it would seem like a time at the cottage would be a joyous experience, just like at the big house. But Christmas Day at the cottage, George and May would spend the afternoon arranging and giving presents to the servants and parcels for the poor people, and May would write about it, stating, "Very nice to be able to do that, but so fatiguing to the body and mind." Well, we don't hear what they ate or drank, but George was said to have drank very little, smoked very little, and ate very little. So George gave Mary some boxes and enamels that had belonged to her uncle, Duke of Cambridge, and much of the Cambridge family silver. According to the book George V, May said that Lady Armstrong was forced to sell because her husband lost his money, and May called him a stupid man. So after they became Queen Mary and King George V, Queen Mary had a dollhouse built for her between 1921 and 1924, and it was a gift from the nation to Queen Mary. The dollhouse is now on display at Windsor Castle. Built on a scale of 1 inch to 1 foot, everything in the house works. Even the plumbing. It's amazing. And items were made by the leading companies of the day, and the library is no exception. It's filled with tiny books written by 170 eminent authors, including Thomas Hardy, Rudyard Kipling, and Arthur Conan Doyle. And in 1924, a 5-centimeter high edition of the Charles Dickens A Christmas Carol was given to the library. So that's pretty neat. So when George V began to do the Christmas broadcast, George had reigned since about 1910, but it wasn't until 1932 that he delivered his first Christmas message. Since then, the Christmas message has evolved into an important part of the Christmas Day celebrations for many in Britain and around the world. George V broadcast the first Christmas message by a monarch on a shortwave radio from Sandringham House at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Christmas Day, 1932. The message lasted 2.5 minutes and reached an audience of 20 million across the world. Surprisingly, King George was approached in 1922 about doing the broadcast, but George felt that it was such a new medium, he didn't want to do it because he felt it was more entertainment than royal formality. So he would be approached again in 1932, and he agreed to do it then. And then he would make only one more Christmas message before his death in 1936. His successors, however, have continued the tradition, and the broadcast is still given at 3 o'clock on Christmas Day, and the greatest change being the introduction of the televised broadcast in 1957. Following the outbreak of the First World War in August 1914, the British Expeditionary Force was sent to the Western Front and was soon joined by troops from the Empire, those from India arriving before the end of the year. On October the 14th, 1914, George V's 17-year-old daughter, Mary, Princess Royal, launched an appeal to fund a Christmas gift for every member of the armed forces. And shortly before Christmas in 1914, advertisements were placed in the British press seeking donations for the Soldiers and Sailors Fund, and £152,691 was soon raised. When the fund was wound up in 1920, the remaining funds were transferred to Queen Mary's maternity home. Each tin was decorated with the image of Mary and other military and imperial symbols, along with the names of the UK's then allies. The standard gift, referred to as the smoker's gift in some post-war publications, consisted of the box itself, 20 cigarettes in a yellow monogram wrapper, an ounce of pipe tobacco, a pipe, a Christmas card, and a photograph of Princess Mary. It was meant to also include a tinder lighter, but a shortage of these meant that in case of the Army, they were often substituted with other gifts, and those in the Navy received a bullet pencil. The bullet pencil consisted of a silver-tipped pencil, either a sterling silver or nickel silver, and a case made from spent .303 cartridge recovered from the UK firing ranges and marked with an M. A non-smoker's gift was also produced at a ratio of 1 for every 28 smoker gifts. It consisted of a box, a Christmas card, and a photograph of Princess Mary, but also, instead of smoking-related materials, it contained a packet of acid tablets, a type of sour lemon-flavored sweet, and a khaki writing case with pencil, paper, and envelopes. And let's see, these 3 further gift types were produced for Indian troops. Most of the Indian troops received the box itself, cigarettes and a tin box of spices, a packet of sugar candy, and a Christmas or New Year card. Sikhs got the same without the cigarettes, and a third gift for followers consisted of a tin box of spices and a Christmas or New Year card. A version was also produced for nurses. It consisted of, again, the box itself, a packet of chocolate, and the usual Christmas or New Year's card. With the aim of every man at the front and every man on the Royal Navy ships getting a gift having been made by January the 5th, 1915, attention was turned to the remaining forces ultimately under the British command, classified as Class B and C by the committee. For these, it was decided that the gift would consist of the box, a New Year card, and a pencil. In 1914, also, King George V and Queen Mary sent Christmas cards to all members of the British Armed Forces. 3 versions were produced, one for the Army, 350,000, for which the king was photographed in khaki, one for the Navy, 250,000, on which he was portrayed in a naval uniform, and another for the sick and wounded, 60,000, using the same photographs as the Army's card, but with a special message with good wishes for their recovery. So that was a really nice thing to do, to show that the military was being thought of and appreciated during their sacrifices, especially during the holiday season away from their families. It was nice to see that George and Mary continued the traditions of Christmas that they were raised on, and they were generous people. They were generous with the people who worked for them. Estate workers would get beef, and George would write letters, and Mary was busy way before the Christmas getting gifts for everyone. World War I showed that they cared about their military fighting during that time, and they were all sent gifts. Also, George, along with Mary, sent out Christmas cards to all members of the British Armed Forces. And George also began the radio broadcast at Christmas time, which made the king feel more accessible by the public carrying him in their homes with his well wishes. So I hope everybody enjoyed the video, And if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, that would help the algorithm to have my videos seen by more people. And I appreciate all who have subscribed and who have been watching the videos. It means a lot to me. Also, if you haven't clicked on the notification bell, if you could do that, it'll let you know whenever a new video is released. And I hope everybody's been having a good day, and tune in again soon for another episode of Queen Elizabeth, A Day in Her Life. Thank you. Bye.